Hey everyone, today we're going to cover workflows on how to 3D model anything from scratch. I get asked this question a lot on how to model this or that prop, this gun, that sword, or this car. So instead of making a one-off tutorial, I'll show you how to apply these workflows to model anything you have in mind. I will use a sports car seat that I've modeled myself, and I'll be using Maya 2022.3 for this demo, but the workflows can be applied to any 3D software. So with that, let's get started. Alright, so here we are in Maya, and you can see that we have the final version of the sports seat here. You can see that it's created as a sub-D model, and of course we can convert this to a low poly game ready asset if we wanted to, but this is the final version that's meant to be subdivided. So if I hit smooth preview with number 3 on the keyboard, you can see how this looks. And we have the entire iteration here, starting with the reference, creating a curve guide, creating a blockout, refine blockout, then retopologizing with proper edge flow, creating detail here where we start to create all the different panels and separations and bevels. Then we have the refined detail where we actually start making this look aesthetically pleasing and giving it that final pass on the form. And then of course we have the final version here with all the representative materials applied. So the first part of our 3D modeling process should be no surprise, but it's going to be gather that reference. You want to always make sure to create a nice detailed mood board, try to find as many angles of whatever you're trying to create, and different color material palettes, whatever it is that you're trying to create, just spend that time researching and finding that reference. In this case, I am creating a variation of this Recaro Sportster GT, and I was easily able to find that online here. So you can see that this is Sportster GT, which is pretty much what I created this off of. And you can see all the different colors here. And what was nice is they have a version of this, which isn't the GT version, but they have a 3D version, right? So you can actually view and rotate and zoom around. It's a pretty high quality model. So I was able to look out, even though it wasn't a one-to-one, I was still able to use this to kind of get a good sense of how, everything looks on the model from all different angles. Now, you're not always going to have this. I mean, I didn't have this for the actual seat that I wanted to model, but it's always good if you can find something like this. Now, there's also blueprints, so you can see if I scroll down a little bit, they'll have some dimensions and blueprints and whatnot. So I created that based off of this scaled reference here. So if I show this, you can see that I literally just created this based off these dimensions here to make sure everything was proper scale, so I can drop this into any other vehicle that I want. Once I have this with the reference and the scale all set up, I can begin creating our curve guides. So what I'm going to do is just set this back to the 0 position here, and I will hide all the other groups and get rid of our scale reference, and we can begin the curve guide process. So I'm just going to go to Create, Curve Tools, and use the CV Curve tool. And what I'd like to do from here is just kind of plot that first point. So you can see we have the front view and the side view here. So I'll put the first point here in the center of our front view, and then I will move that back for our side view here. So if you middle mouse drag, you can kind of move these points here. And it just makes it easier to start on it's centered both in the front and the side view. Then I can start left clicking to create more points. And just to make sure this is, one-to-one with the blueprint, you can kind of move this as you create these points. So once you get used to it, it moves by pretty quick, and you're able to create a nice accurate version of the curves and based off of this blueprint. Now, I understand you're not always going to have the blueprints, you're not always going to have something to reference, but in past tutorials, I've created curves based off of reference images or just regular photography. So it is possible to do this, or just doing it from scratch gives you a little bit more control than doing this from nothing. So it just helps you get a good unblanking of the page and allows you to get and focus on this form here. So I'm just going to go ahead and create these points here just like this. And there we go. This is an example of one of the curves for the shape of this car seat here, this sports car seat. So it looks really good and allows us to just really focus on this form. And this is the process that I use to create all the main lines and the key forms of this seat here. And you can of course make adjustments if you accidentally moved some things. You can just hold right click, go to control vertex and move it left or right like so. And this is what we got. So I use this process over and over again to do the entire model or the entire seat. So if I can simply duplicate this since we're on the line of symmetry here, control D to duplicate. And we're using the x-axis as our line of symmetry, and you can just hit -1, and you can start to really build up these curves to create the main forms. I've used this in the past for creating the car tutorial. You can see that in this one, blocking in your models. I've used that here, and setting up reference images. I've done that in these tutorials as well, how to set up image planes. So if you want to see me do that in more detail, I do that in other videos as well. But this will give us this process. I'm not going to go and do the entire seat, but this will give us the curves. And you can see that I have it set up here, and I can set this back to 0. And this again is all of the main forms, including some hardware pieces here to get a good sense of the form. And again, this allows you to focus on what matters, which is the form and the silhouette of your model. Curves are super easy to manipulate. You're not worried about a bunch of vertices or edges or polygons. You're just focusing on creating good, accurate reference. And this is going to help set you up for a really, really good model for the next step. Now, once I have this next step, you can see that I have the next part of the process, which is going to be creating a blockout. Now, I don't focus on topology here. Okay, so for the blockout, we are just getting in the main forms of our whatever it is we're trying to model. It could be the car seat or whatever it is. So if I hold shift and right click, I can create a without anything selected, I can create a cube, or you know what, I'll create a plane. So shift right click, create a plane, and scale that up. And I'm only going to give this maybe 1, maybe the width, I'll give it 2 subdivisions like so, just so we have a line of symmetry. And you can see I'm using world X here. And now I can kind of put this in position. And this is the process that I'm using for blocking out. By the way, if you hear some weird sounds in the background, I do apologize, but there are fighter jets going over my house. Nothing crazy, it's just an air show. There's like 4 fighter jets, so hopefully it's not being picked up by the audio too much. If it is, I do apologize. So I'll try to mediate that. But anyways, we have this. I'm going to set this plane up right kind of at the base here for the seat. And it helps when you're blocking things out initially is to, I'd focus on one side just so we have less curves. And with these curves, I would say I'm going to just hide the bottom curves here. So I'm going to just Control H, hide that. Now that we got that, I can go to my modeling toolkit and we can just go to edge mode and just start. You can see move, we're just double checking. We can move this. And from here, I'm going to actually hide the other 2 curves. So these don't get in the way. I can now start snapping these vertices to the curves that I created. Now the way to do this is a little bit tricky because you'd think you just want to left click and move it and it'll snap. But you can see if I'm holding C on my keyboard for curve, you can see it starts to highlight curve mode here. So you can actually just enable this if you know you're going to be doing this and just kind of work on that. But you don't left click, instead you middle mouse near the curve. Right? So if I take this, you don't middle mouse drag it like this. It's not going to snap. Instead, you middle mouse drag near the curve. You want the vertex to snap. It's a little bit odd, but it works. So if you select the vertex and then middle mouse drag on the curve, it will snap right to it. And this will allow you to snap to any curves that you have set up. And then I can just kind of continue this process, right? So I can hold shift, left click, and we're just edge copying or planar modeling now. And I'm just using this to just focus on the overall form. Now you don't have to be super crazy and, make sure that it is perfect one-to-one, but you certainly can if you wanted to go through and do every single vertex. So if I, again, select this, hold C, middle mouse drag on that, and then you can kind of move it along the curve, which is kind of nice. So again, select the curve, select the vertex, go to the curve, hold C, middle mouse drag, and it snaps. So very nice. And it's a great way to just focus on the form. And this shouldn't take you long to kind of rough this in, because at this point in time, again, you'll notice that I'm not worried. I'm not focusing on the edge flow. I am not worried about topology at this point. I am not worried about edge flow. I am creating a rough blockout. That's what I mean by this. You can see I don't have any of the forms here. I don't have any of the edges or cut-ins. So what I do is create this blockout, and then I refine the blockout. So I add more detail. And to simply refine the blockout, like you can go here now and hold shift right click to grab your multi-cut tool, and I like to use insert with edge flow. And what this does, so if I hold control, and you can see I can start to highlight the edge where I want it. And then if you just middle mouse click, it'll put it right in the middle, and you can start to see this gives you a nice way of adding good curvature to your model without having to manually do it. And now, if you do want to manually do it, you can turn off edge flow here if you want a little bit more control. And I can, again, maybe control middle mouse, put that right in the middle. Double click that edge, press W, and move on the normal with control middle mouse. You see that? So we're just moving that on the normal, holding control, middle mouse drag, just like so. So that's a lot easier than just, trying to manually move it up and over, and it just gets real messy. So moving it on the normal is definitely a good way to refine. So that's how I go from this process of just really going through and creating a simple version of the seat and the blockout. And I don't care about triangles. I don't care about n-gons here. I'm just worried about form. So we want to, again, separate the form from the edge flow and topology. This is probably the number one thing that I've noticed when I'm teaching and students try to create very complex versions or complex models, and they're worried about everything all at the same time. So if I hide the ref layer here, and you can see that we're not worried about any of these beveling details. We're not worried about any of the separations or the paneling. We're just focused on form. Right? So to think about it is, it's like when you're sculpting, you're just building up form. If you're drawing or doing figure drawing or anatomy drawing, you're not going to start doing contouring and shading right as soon as you lay a few lines down, which is what I see a lot. People are in this phase and they're going to start separating and beveling. I've seen people very experienced who are able to do that, but to be honest, it just makes things a lot easier to handle. I was able to create this fully detailed seat here in less than 6 hours. So less than one working day, right? So that's pretty efficient to be able to create something this detailed and, not have to spend multiple days on this, right? And it's all because I'm using this simple workflow process of, going from reference to curves, and then now to blockout. Now, once we have this, where we have this refined blockout, I will take and start doing retopology and edge flow. So you might be saying, well, why not just modify this? It just makes it easier, at least in my case, to just separate edge flow and topology from the form. I don't want to go in here now and start worrying about like, oh, okay, I have this edge here and I want to start, cutting in some pieces or edges and going through and doing that. And again, you're like, okay, now I got triangles here, I got n-gons here. It just overcomplicates things, right? So instead, what I do, even if there's triangles and n-gons, that's okay, is I'll just hit Control D to duplicate this. And I'm going to actually set this back on the z-axis here, is I'll take this seat here, or this piece, and now I'm going to focus on topology and edgeflow. So I'll subdivide this model. Assuming that you didn't create this too crazy with messy topology, you can subdivide it. And I've done this even with messy topology before, because it does a pretty good job handling triangles and whatnot. And I'll take this and set this live. So I have this object selected. I will set it live. I will now go to quad draw here to the left, or excuse me, to the right menu here. And now you can start to see I can just start plotting points here. And this now allows us to focus strictly on the topology and edge flow. Why? Because my form is all good to go and it's all set. Again, this is very similar to the sculpting process, right? Where you just separate form and the silhouette of the model, and then you come back later and do retopology, right? So I can move this up and I can start now worrying about my edges here. So I'm going to actually delete that one and I'm going to make a nice simple edge. So if you've never used quad draw before, I cover it in quite a few videos, but the way that it works is you just, with the live surface, enable quad draw mode and then start left clicking points. And you'll notice once you create 4, as in quad, hold shift and left click, and there you go. It will draw a quad. And then once you do that, you can hover anywhere that it sees 4 other vertices, it will create a quad. So you can start to do that. And then if you want to move an edge or a vertice, you just middle mouse drag that. And there you go. So you can just now, again, focus strictly on the edge flow here and make sure that everything looks good. And we're not worried about the form because we know we spent that time with the curves and the blockout and the refined blockout to make sure that we have a nice edge. So just like if you're modeling facial topology, what have you, you focus on the loops first. And then from there, you know, you would go through the process of creating those details. So I can now go to quad draw, and you can also hold tab and left click, and you can start to see, all right, cool. Now I can start to drag this and create, you know, more complex. You can see this red line. Hopefully that's coming through in the recording, but you can see I can start to drag this and follow this red line, which is the curve guides. So now you can start to see, if I hold, I just have this script here for X-ray mode, just like this. You can toggle that right up here. But as I start to do that, it just makes it so much nicer to now focus on everything that you need. And I've used this method for modeling cars. I've used this method for modeling props, guns, vehicle interiors, shoes, what have you. This is not specific to, you know, seat modeling here, even though I've modeled a crazy amount of vehicle seats. And then now we can start to add in the main topology here for these edges. So these now, based off of my pure ref here, since I'm not going for this simple one, this simpler, I wanted the GT version. So I have these nice complex angles, kind of like chevron logos here on the seat back and the seat bottom. And you just continue that along the way. And you can actually see there's another one that runs across here. So again, I'm not going to do the whole seat, but I wanted you to get a sense of how to do this and how to kind of build this up. I'll also show you how I did this through time lapses. So I'll cover kind of the whole process here where I model the full seat through a time lapse and I can narrate it. And now I can kind of start to add in these edges here in the middle. A lot of times what I do is if I subdivide once, I find that doing every other edge gives you some good clean topology here, and middle mouse drag, and there you go. You can start to see, you can really start to build this up fast. And this is what I meant. I was able to do this whole seat again in, less than 6 hours. And it just, if you break up each step, you're able to create really, really complex details here really, really fast and efficiently. Okay, I think that about wraps up what I wanted to do here for topology and edgeflow. And this is good. You can see how we're going from reference to blockout, refine blockout, retopology and edgeflow, and then now we're getting into the detailing. Okay, and the detailing process is now that I have these edges here for, all the edge flows, this is where the retopology and edge flow comes in absolutely clutch, right? Because it allows me to just leverage everything and all the preparation that I've done here. And like if I duplicate this and I will set this now back to the 0x. So we have let me shift P unparent that, and then I'll set it back to the 0x. Now that I have this, I can go to edge mode, select this with the world X symmetry, and you can see that I can select these edges like so. And for those that have watched my car modeling series, it is very, very similar to how I did the car panel. So I have a video on how to master paneling here. So how to master panels right here is very similar to that, where you can see an entire video focused to that. And we have our front view here. Let me just toggle on and off our rough layer. Sometimes things get a little weird. Oops, I forgot I moved it. So I set that back to the 0. I grab this piece and I want to make sure, oh, that's right, it's not in my blueprint. And so instead I'll use my curve guide. So this is a perfect example of, I want to make sure I grab the right edges here. So you can see it's not this edge. So that was a good catch. It's this edge here. And it should be this edge as well. Like so. And not these ones. So I was off by one set. So I'm not going to do all of them, but I'll just kind of show you how I grab these edges here, like so. And for paneling, what I do is I grab the next edge over. So something like this. And let me just select my curves to make sure I grab the right ones. And I grab the wrong one here. So just grabbing the right edges. Okay. All right, now I'm good. So I grab these ones and we should have all of the pieces. And there we go. All right, so I have all my edges selected. And what I do from here is with my edges selected, I will hold shift, right click, bevel, and go through the process now of turning off fraction, because when it comes to seat modeling or hard surface modeling, you want to make sure that these seams are pretty continuous all the way across. So I turn off fraction. So I want the seams on the entire vehicle to be the same. So instead I use offset, and that's where you can actually type in an exact value here. Now sometimes you get this weird thing. This is a Maya bug or Maya thing. It's not a bug because you can change it. So it's this mitter along. You can just do it along edge and it'll straighten the edges and give you a little bit of control there. And now I can set these segments to 2, and there you go. Now, because we have this proper edge flow, I can begin the process of paneling this here. All right, so now I can select, these edges. So I'm going to do this kind of quick. It'll be a little bit rough and dirty, but it will give us what we need. So you can see actually it went all the way around here. I grabbed an extra edge, but we're good for this sample here. And I'm just holding control and deselecting the edges that I don't want. So now that I have that, make sure that I didn't over select, because it's going to make it a little bit easier. All right, so we have these, and you can hold, Control Shift to add selection. So we have that, and I just end up simply just detaching these. So now I can hold Shift right click and detach components, And there you go. So you can start to see now, like I can, if I wanted to just quickly like cut this piece off, and I can do the same bevel, right? So this is what I mean by fraction. If I wanted to add more bevels, you just turn offset as fraction off and instead type in offset, which will give you, instead of the offset, we'll use kind of the distance between the two edges, which is like, it gives you different bevels. But if you turn that off, use offset, you can actually get the exact value that you want, which is a 0.5 centimeter thick bevel. 2 segments, there we go. And I'll just now detach this. And so I get these all kind of broken up to how I want. And I can just simply now separate. Now with this separate, I'm good to go. And then I can go through the process now of extruding these details here. So I now want to add in the extrusion. So I hold now Control E or just Shift Extrude, Shift right click Extrude, and I can move these in. And I typically keep it consistent, so I'll always use the same local translate, which is 0.5 with 1 division, or excuse me, 2 divisions. And then now what I can do is the same thing here. And I will hit G to repeat last, and I'll move it again. Now this time, you'll notice if I get in here, sometimes it does it where it's like they go off in like 2 different directions. If that happens, then just simply go into vertex mode and I'll snap them before I add the division. And so snapping these here, holding V, left click, and there you go. So we're just snapping vertices here, and hold Shift right click, multi-cut, and then there you go. You're just now getting these where you get these nice panels in here, and I use that process throughout the rest of the model. Now you notice I over beveled here, and that's no problem. I did that so it keeps everything clean here, which is part of my paneling process, and I can simply Control backspace once I have those selected, hit 3, make sure I clean up any vertices, and there you go. Okay, so that is what I used for this process here, which is this detailing process. Okay, and I use that throughout the entire model and separated it all and went by very, very nicely. And then from this point, I can now begin the process of refining and making this look like a very comfortable seat, right? That somebody can sit in and be comfortable, and it'll look like it'll hold you as you're driving a very fast car, right? So from here, what I end up doing is grabbing these panels here. So I'll do it on kind of these what's called inserts of the seats. You know, you can select multiple objects, right? Because you want to be careful not to merge things, because these are like overlapping. So if you combine and use merge vertices, then you get overlapping faces, which you don't want. So instead, I keep things separate. I select the panels, and then I grab the faces. And now this is where our beveling helps, right? So you can see that I can now grab the kind of inner pieces. So if I hold tab, you can actually just kind of paint spray that and control click what you don't want, and you get something like this, right? And of course I'll deselect what I don't want. And if I do it for these center inserts now, hold control and just middle mouse move it, look at that. It gives you these nice, very soft kind of, again, like pillowy cushions here, and you can then kind of work your way down to the middle and start to just bring out the middle pieces. And this is where I did that detailing and that cleanup, and you can see how now these start to look really, really soft. And the other thing you'll notice too in the reference, they're a lot more angular so they're very sharp here. So what I ended up doing was just kind of adding in some extra edges to really hold that form. And what's nice is, you know, if I like Control D duplicate and move these back to the center here, I can select these, jump into edge mode here, and then I can just use multi-cut, and you can cut across multiple sub-objects and separate objects, and there you go. And it works really, really well for the most part. It didn't do it well right there, so you'd have to kind of re-mirror that piece. So, you know, a lot of times, sometimes the symmetry gets a little bit wonky. So, you know, I turn it off. You'll see me do that in the time lapse where I'll just delete things and then remirror it just in case the symmetry doesn't work all that well. And I went through and did that for the bottom pieces here. So, you know, that gives you here on this final seat here. And I had to do some cleanup, you know, because I noticed in the references like, oh man, this is going to be a tricky one. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all kind of conjoining. And no matter what, it's not going to be a perfect bevel. So you're going to just kind of start merging things in where they're going to seam and sew all these different panels together. But all right, so that is the process that I use to model this. So, you know, I applied that to the rest of the model. I even did that for some hardware components here. So this piece here, I have this group. If I go all the way down here, oops, should be in miscellaneous, this one. And you can see that it was just this messy piece. And I said, you know what? It does not matter because I'm going to take this, extrude it, and I don't care if the edges are lined up, and just use this. And then I ended up retopoing it. So I had something to work from, which is this nice clean piece that can be subdivided. So I'll kind of hide my whip and hide all the other pieces and get rid of my curve groups. And I know I didn't want to go too deep in making this like a seat modeling tutorial, but what I did want to show you was how to kind of break these different parts of the process into kind of this detailing phase, okay? So again, so you have this, so just a kind of final recap, right? When you break things down into these phases, it makes just modeling so much more manageable. So again, reference gathering, building a curve guide, creating a blockout, refining your blockout, doing retopology and edgeflow if necessary, then detailing, which could be paneling or whatever it is. Just, you know, I break it down sometimes into primary, secondary, and tertiary details, right? And then the final refined detail, which I would say again is the tertiary details of adding the cushions, the panels, and then of course I have the all of the hardware elements here, and then the back of the seat as well. All right, so this is workflows that I use to model anything, and it's helped me become very efficient and model pretty much anything that I've wanted or have needed to. So I'm going to wrap up by showing the final time lapse of the 5 to 6 hour or so time lapse being sped up. So if you're interested in that, I can maybe post that online somewhere if you want the one-to-one. I won't be narrating it or anything, but yeah, you'll have that. And definitely take a look at the YouTube channel. And for those that are still sticking around listening, I know I haven't posted in, you know, I've been posting sparsely over the past couple of months, just been dealing with some personal stuff, just like moving and freelance work and whatnot. So I'm hoping to get back on schedule and get some more videos out. So if you have any suggestions or questions or comments or anything on what you'd like to see in future tutorials, please let me know down in the comments below, and I'll see you guys around.